Hello, my dear friends. Have you ever had an experience where you're walking in the park and you see these people that are looking up in the trees and they're looking in the leaves and they're looking in the bushes, and they might have a pair of binoculars and they're searching. What are they looking for? These are ornithologists, bird watchers, and they are animated and excited if they see something different. If they'll see a bird with a red tail or a long beak or something unusual, and they're so excited about it that they take out their cameras and they're shooting pictures of the birds, and they'll put it away in their albums that they saw this type of bird. It's they're excited about the beauty of nature. Well, we have to be excited as Jews. It's okay to be an ornithologist, but we have to be excited about Torah thoughts. And just like the birds, you have to catch them when they're there, and otherwise they fly by. So there's Torah thoughts that oftentimes just fly by, and at a time when you least expect it. I was once sitting in a subway, and there were two people sitting next to me, and they were talking to each other, and one person shared a thought with the other. It was such a beautiful, it was a short thought. I used it to make an entire drasha on Yom Kippur from that thought. And you never know when you're going to be in a place where you expect it the least, and all of a sudden somebody says something that moves you or excites you, and you have to grab hold. You can't take a picture, but store it away in your memory bank. Such was the case. I was in the cemetery a few years ago with Rabbi Hilzermath, and I believe we were there. I think it was the Hakamas HaMatzeva, the unveiling of his father's tombstone, and I think that we were maybe after people had left or before people came. We were standing together, and he said, I have to tell you a beautiful Rashbam on this week's Parsha. Who is the Rashbam? The Rashbam is Rashi's grandson. Rashi, is one of the primary commentaries on Chumash, and he had a grandson, Shmuel ben Meir, whose acronym is Rashbam, and he also wrote a commentary. But it's very different from Rashi, because Rashi oftentimes brings in midrashim and homiletical material. The Rashbam focuses on the pshat, the plain meaning. So the Chumash says that when Yaakov left his father's home and he went to Chutz La'aretz, there were angels. He had a dream. The ladder was going, rooted in the ground, going into the heavens. And there were Malachi Elokim Olam V'Yardim. There were angels that went up and down. So Rashi's troubled. Angels come from the Shemayim. They should have first gone down and then come up. Why does the Chumash say Olam V'Yardim? So Rashi says because there were different angels that escorted Yaakov in Eretz Yisrael. And then when he was about to go into Chutz La'aretz, there was a change of guard. And now it was a new set of angels. So the angels of Eretz Yisrael went back up, Olim, and then the angels of Chutz La'aretz were Yardim. That's what Rashi says. The Rashbam, though, says, Lefi Hapshat, if you want to know the plain meaning, why does the Torah say Olim v'Yardim? It's not a problem, it's not difficult to understand why it mentions Olim first. Shekain derech Eretz lahaskir aliyah kadam yerida, because it's appropriate to first mention elevation before you talk about descent. So the question is, what is it? This is the Rashbam that Rabbi Baruch told me, and I was so excited about it. It's such a beautiful idea, and I'll tell you why. What's the reason why you should mention ascent before descent? What difference does it make? Which order it is? So the point here is because a person always should be focused on what's positive. Now, there's many examples in Torah literature of being focused on the positive and not thinking or not focusing on the negative. And I'll share with you a few. But I think this idea of the Rashbam is particularly unique. But first, let me share with you some other examples. Hakaras Hatov, a person is supposed to have appreciation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the good that he bestows upon us. Now, there's always things that that are difficult in life, that we're not so happy about. So there's maybe somebody, let's say, we got a raise and we got a new job, but in the meantime we lost $5. So people, instead of thinking about, wow, I'm so fortunate, they'll harp on I lost $5. I can't understand how that happened to me. How did I lose it? It fell out of my pocket. How come I didn't notice? I give always the example. Chazal say that when Klal Yisrael was escaping from the Egyptians and they had no place to go in the desert, the Egyptians were running after them with their chariots, and then suddenly God split the sea, and the Jews passed through the sea to safety. So Chazal say that the Jews complained as they walked through the Yam Suf because they said there was tit in Mitzrayim, there was mortar and mud and dirt in Mitzrayim that we worked with, and there's mortar on the sea as well. We can't escape the tit, the mortar. So that's what they complained about. So what's wrong with these people? This was one of the most glorious, memorable moments in world history, that the Jews, their lives were about to be snuffed out. They said, weren't there enough graves in Egypt that we had to come to the desert to die? And then a moment later, the sea splits and miraculously they're able to pass through. So what are they thinking about? They should have tremendous hakaras hatov to Kadosh Baruch Hu, instead of thinking about, my shoes got muddy. It's mud again, mud in Mitzrayim and mud in the sea. So that's an example of how a person misses the opportunity to focus on the good. Hakaras hatov is you have to look for the good. Another example of being positive. You always have to give people the benefit of the doubt. We tend to do the opposite. We think the worst about people. I shared many times this story. I brought my lunch to work. I put it in the refrigerator. 12:30, I went to retrieve my lunch. It wasn't there. Somebody stole my lunch. And then I began to think, who is it that stole my lunch? Or maybe it's this person. And then people were walking by and I saw somebody going to the lunch. Maybe that's the one that stole my lunch. And I had all these terrible thoughts about maybe this one's a ganav and that one's a ganav, and I didn't realize it. When I went home, I opened up my briefcase, and there in my briefcase was my lunch. I thought I put it in the refrigerator, but I never did. That's an example of not being down with kafslus. We always have to give people the benefit of the doubt, and people always jump to conclusions about other people. They're no good, they did this and they did that. That's seeing the positive in people. Another example is that don't look for people's faults. Look for the good in people. Rabbi, the Shari Tshuva says that a person always has to see the good in another individual. And he says the Rishayim, wicked people manage to always focus. There could be a little flaw in the person, a little crack, and that's what they find. That's like with a laser beam that goes straight. A guided missile goes with a laser, goes straight to that target. So he compares it to flies. Flies always manage to find rotten meat. We don't even know where the flies come from. You're sitting there, and all of a sudden, I don't see any flies in it, and there happens to be a rotten piece of meat in the garbage. The flies are swarming around the meat. Where's their radar? How did they know? But that's how flies are. They always find that which is rotten. And he says, in contrast, the tzaddik says, always sees what's good. He says there was a tzaddik walking past a carcass of an animal that was decaying. So the one person said, oh, how putrid is the odor of this carcass. And but the tzaddik said, look how beautiful are the whites of its teeth, because there's nothing good about a decaying carcass, but the teeth don't decay. So he says, look at the whites of the teeth. So a person always has to, it's easy to find flaws in people, but a person always has to look for the good. And an extension is not to speak Lashon Hara, because Lashon Hara is also, it's highlighting the failures and the shortcomings of another person. Don't think about that, or don't highlight that, and certainly don't share it with other people. Think about the person's good. The Torah says, we're supposed to be happy. We're supposed to go through life feeling happy and satisfied with what HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us, and not to be in a state of atzvus, not to be depressed. The Meraglim, they came back with their negative report about Eretz Yisrael. They said, "Lo nuchol lalos." It's not possible for us to go up to Eretz Yisrael. And Kalev and Yeshua said, "Olo nala." We definitely will be able to go up to Eretz Yisrael. Think positive. So these are just a few examples where you're supposed to focus on what's positive and not which is negative. You're supposed to think about the cup half full and not the cup half empty. But what I found so intriguing about the comment of the comment, I want to give one last example, and that is that in language, a person's supposed to use language that's positive and not negative. So the Chazal say that in Parashas Noach, it says that the behema asher einenu tahara, the animals that were kosher, and the einenu tahara, the animals that were not kosher, came to the teva. So Chazal say, could have said, instead of saying einenu tahara, it could have said the behemoths who were tamei, and it would have saved 11 letters. but the Torah did not use the word tamei shelo hotzi davar meguna in order not to express something that's negative. Saying not kosher is negative. It's saying that it's tamei, it's defiled, it's impure, is negative. Say something positive. It's not kosher. It's the absence of kosher instead of saying that it's no good. So in any event, there are many more examples. But what I found intriguing about this comment of the Rashbam is that in this case of the malachim going up and down, it really has absolutely no impact. I mean, all the other cases that I gave, hakar satov, the person's supposed to think about the positive. So it affects how a person relates to Kadosh Baruch Hu, what type of feelings they have, seeing the faults in others and complaining about them, and speaking lashon hara and not giving people the benefit of the doubt, or going through life with pessimism. All these things affect behavior, and there's consequences and outcomes. But what difference in the world does it make if you say the word olim before yordim or yordim before olim? Why is it that the Rashbam says shekain derech eretz? It's the proper thing to do is to haskir aliyah kol yerida, to mention aliyah, ascent, before descent. It is not hurting anybody. It's not making any difference. It is not talking about our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's just a description of the angels that were going up and down. So does it matter if you say the angels went up and then they came down, or they went down and they came up? Why does that matter? So I think the answer is because what you see here is the heightened sensitivity of Chazal. Because if a person wants to be able to be positive about life, and there's all these examples that I gave, this is just a minuscule amount of the examples in throughout Chazal and Shas and Torah literature of the different ways that a person is supposed to be positive. So, but if a person wants to strengthen that capacity or that ability or that tendency to be positive, then even in things that are so subtle and so perhaps they appear insignificant, a person has to train himself. If you're going to mention elevation and descent, say elevation before descent, because that will give you a heightened awareness for the importance of being positive and not negative. It's true, it makes no difference in this case, but it'll have an impact because it changes by talking that way. It impacts on the way a person thinks. And when a person is looking to see what's positive, then they're going to give priority to that which is in a positive sense, and that's why Aliyah should be stated before Yerida. I thought that was a beautiful thought. I heard it in the cemetery. It flew by, but I caught on to it. I didn't take a snapshot, but I put it away in my mind, and it's a beautiful Rashbam. You can look it up yourself. It's on Pasuk Parashas Ches, Pasuk Yud Gimel, Pasuk Yud Beis, Olim v'Yardim, that the Torah specifically says ascent before descent, because in life, a Jew, and it's true for everybody, always think about the positive before the negative, and even if it's trivial matters, it will have an impact on the way you see the world and the way you see yourself in relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it will ultimately have an enormous effect.